Let's start with prioritizing self-care in your life. And let's go back to the beginning and talk about how you got to a space today of being able to do that and what that journey has looked like for you.
Yeah, I'm going to go way, way back because self-care wasn't a concept that I even understood for a long time. I started in massage therapy school shortly after high school. And that started to blossom just the healing part of me, the healthcare part of me, and that organic side of who I am. So that's where it began. And I always did self-care since then. I had some trauma and some PTSD. I toured with the circus and it was horrendous. And
wow.
I couldn't not practice self-care. And I had to go into self-care in some extreme ways, like full-time for years kind of a thing, to function in the world, to survive, to heal from all the things that I saw and experienced and the things that happened in my body. So self-care came from like a dabbling kind of thing into an absolute life necessity. And now I'm coming out 11 years later, coming out into like, okay, self-care is a thing I do, but I can't do it all the time. I have to function in the world a little bit more now that I'm healed in a lot of ways. So I've had a large range of where self-care lands in my life as a priority.
Yeah. And I think it's so important that I think it's powerful that you recognized that you had the time that you had to put into it for a while and the necessity of that, because we don't always do that. Sometimes we just keep going. And if we step it and we keep going, then it becomes even a bigger problem and shows up in even more harmful ways. What are some exercises that really help you now in your self-care?
I think one of the main tenets of my self-care is that I manage my energy and not my time, because my energy fluctuates. I have more energy on some days than I have on other days. I have time for 8 clients in a day. I do not have that energy. I do not have that in me to give that much. Yeah. And my values lie in different places. I have to give to myself. I have to cook for myself. I have to take care of my body. So that's a big tenet of my self work. My self-care is to manage my energy and not my time.
I love that. I think if we could all operate from that place, how much healthier we would be. Being less caught up in the 40+ hour work week and more caught up in what energy we have to give. And especially for women. And we've had conversations on this podcast in the past about the fact that our energies fluctuate throughout the month based on how the time of life we're in, the season we're in, cycles, if we're still having periods, and so really being able to adjust where we're giving our energy and our time and how much of it according to those weeks. And it's so much healthier when we recognize that and are able to do that. I think that's such a healthy approach instead of just pounding out, I got to get this done today. I can do, that's something I can do better at. The one thing I have started doing is I will name my emotions each day and what I'm feeling each day to inform me on what I've got to give and what needs to be moved through. And so looking at my calendar, I'm like, okay, this is what I have and this is how I can show up in it. And sometimes going as far as I'm going to have to move this or adjust this in my schedule. I don't have the capacity for it today, but I can still do a lot more work in that area of just, each day, really examining and being mindful of that. I think that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's one of the healthiest things I've ever heard people talk about.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. When did you get to that point? How long would you say you've been in that space?
Again, I kind of dabbled in it with the early years of my massage therapy career because I can't do 8 hours a day of work. I can't do a 40-hour work week like normal people do or the conventional week. But then 11 years ago or so after I left the circus, I didn't I had little to give anyone at all. I just didn't have it. I didn't have the reserves. My adrenals were shot. I had PTSD. I had broken bones. I was just like really not okay on a lot of levels, kind of all levels. And I didn't have anything to give for a long time. And so it's what I needed to do to not judge myself. And not like beat myself up. Like, you had all this time today. Why didn't you do this and this and this and this? Yeah. And I had to realize, like, I had all this time today and I had to stretch and I had to cry and I had to go get a massage and I had to go for a run and I had to go for a walk after the run and I had to take a nap after that. And like, this took all day to do the things I needed to do for myself. So it's what I kind of needed to adopt, to have compassion for my situation. Yeah. And to not be cruel. You know, we're all our own worst enemies. And so I can get really mean to myself and like, you should have done more. You should have been better. All this self-talk, which I think a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we do a number on ourselves, and it goes back to, and we talked about this a lot, of going back. Would you talk to a friend that way? Would you talk to a loved one that way? And thinking about those things. But yeah, we do. And because of the expectations the society has decided are acceptable, and you know, what our value lies in. That's what's so important. That's why we do the character traits. And, you know, I talked about this earlier, identifying yourself through those as you define yourself, so that you can operate from there and not from a space where the culture might be directing you that's not healthy and not healthy for you and not right for you. So thank you for sharing that. So powerful. That's really good. And this goes nicely into confidently setting boundaries. I'm sure you had to set some boundaries as you went through this time of what you realized you couldn't give. But go back to wherever you want to in your story to talk about your boundaries journey.
I have so much to say about boundaries. We could talk about boundaries for quite some time. I have a coaching program around boundaries. It's a huge passion of mine, because to me, I see that it is this core fundament of what I needed to learn to be in a healthy place, and what I see people missing often is just, before even setting boundaries, what are boundaries? What understanding what that is and how that operates. Most people don't understand what it is, and then they get mad at themselves for failing to set them. So I have a lot to say about boundaries. I've taken some classes. I've read some books on it. The most understanding I got out of boundaries was when I was doing sex work, because the risks were higher. And I needed to, I went into the work after I saw firsthand how healing it was, and that it was above and beyond anything I was doing with clients, that I could heal someone by being with them in such a vulnerable, intimate setting, that it was just exponentially more powerful as a healing modality. I was hooked. I was like, yes, I'm doing this. This is what I want to do with my life. I want to make big change. So yeah, I'm going to be here, and I don't really care what other people have to say about it. So that was step one in me doing sex work. Step two was, okay, how can I do this without losing myself? I am committed to not being what I understood at the time as the stereotypes of sex work that were drug addicted, checked out, desperate, different things like this, which I now don't agree with those ideas from my experience. But that's what I needed for me. Okay, I'm going to do this. How can I do this and maintain integrity for myself? Right. And that's how I developed a deep, deep understanding of boundaries. And my body was in charge. My body was in charge the whole time when I was negotiating, when I was with clients, when I was rejecting someone from being a client, all of the above. For over 10 years, my body directed these scenarios. And when it didn't, when I put something above my body, like I needed that money or some other value, when my values were off, I had consequences. I had scenarios that weren't fun, that weren't pleasant, that, weren't what I was committed to doing. When I put my body first and foremost, it guided me into what I was okay with and what I was not okay with in each moment. Yeah. So I developed a really intricate, beautiful connection and relationship with a deep part of myself, a deep knowing in myself. And I honored that. That comes before boundary setting. And I think people miss that a lot. My work is in internal boundaries. Most people talk about external boundaries, how it relates to other people, our conversations with loved ones, yada, yada. That's great. Good work. Keep talking about it. I love it. Before that comes your relationship with yourself. And that's what I'm focused on in my work, is that dynamic. And so again, I could talk about it a lot.
So many good points there. One, when you have choice, boundaries are decided when you have choice and you make the choices, and the choices are yours. And that internal work, we cannot be healthy, and I think even be comfortable setting boundaries with other people until we understand what they mean for us, until we mean what they understand what they mean for all our values. And you, like you said, your body will tell you. It will let you know when you are out of kilter with your values, when you are out of kilter with your values, your boundaries, your expectations. I also love that you openly talk about this. You made a choice. There's so many stigmas around sex work and what it is and what it isn't. And most of it comes from other people's opinions that haven't experienced it, or the trauma cases, which do exist. Those are real. They absolutely exist. They are real. They happen all the time, day to day. And we need to be aware of those, and we need to have resources for those and help for those and healing for those. But you talk about it in a way, it's like, this was a choice I made. I set the boundaries within it. I decided how I was going to approach it and types of activities, people, their boundaries, their needs. And I aligned those. And I think it's very important that we talk about that in that way, and remove the stigma of people's choices and what is healing and what is healthy for one person may or may not be healthy for the other person, but not trying to tell someone else, oh, that's not healthy. You can't do that. Right. When no one else gets to decide that for you. And so I love how you openly talk about that, and you openly talk about your boundaries within that, your values within that. I think that's really powerful. It's really vulnerable. It's really authentic. And it's another example of those conversations we need to take the stigma off of, and also how we can show up supporting each other unapologetically and respecting each other's decisions. There's a real issue in this country with respect or the decisions that women make around their bodies, their sexuality, their choices, their health care. So I love how you talk about this openly. It's so important. If we're going to really show up for each other as women unapologetically, we've got to get to a space where we're showing up and respecting, and also, again, speaking truth to what's happening to women, that we need to change when there's not these stigmas for everybody, and there's different rules, and we don't change these narratives without talking about them. So thank you I just appreciate your authenticity and honesty and vulnerability in that, because it's a vulnerable place to go. And I really have so much respect for that.
Yeah, thanks. It took a long time and a lot of work. I hid it for many years, never because of shame. Like, I really have not been ashamed of what I did when I did sex work, because I was there. I witnessed the beauty. I witnessed the transformation. I witnessed how I protected myself and how I was safe in every environment. Like, I know what I went through. So I didn't have shame. I had a lot of pride. I still have a lot of pride for that time in my life. I think still the most powerful work I've ever done. But society tells me that I'm bad and that I'm wrong and that I'm with the devil and all sorts of other things that I feel sad for other people. I have a lot to offer. I have a lot of wisdom. I have a lot of beauty. I have a lot of love and compassion and knowledge. And people often don't understand that what you think about me, like, as a sex worker, it says a lot more about you than it does about me like it really isn't about me if you think I'm evil.
Yeah.
That really is for you to look at for you. I do want to say real quick that my sex work was legal. I worked legally in brothels, and I had security guards and I had management support me with the decisions I'd make with being with someone and not being with someone. I was in a very privileged position that most sex workers aren't. So I think that's important to note on
Absolutely.
a lot of levels. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's very important. I mean, those things are part of what made the experience safe, possible, where you were able to set your boundaries and you were able to live out of your values. Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that, because it's very important, because as we know, there are many scenarios out there that aren't that way. So thanks for that. Yeah. I appreciate that. And I think you're right. It's so many times when people have something to say about our choices and about our life, when we're good, we're healthy, we're comfortable, it does. It says, and I think if you are in a position where you think you want to speak into someone else's experience, make sure you're coming at it from a healthy place, and make sure it's not rooted in something that you need to do some healing in. You need to take a look at. You need to, explore, why is this triggering me so much? I mean, I think that's something. Anytime we think we have a right to speak into someone else's existence experience, why do we think that we have a right to do that? Why do we think that it's our place to speak into someone else's choices? And look at that first. I think that, so thank you for bringing it up. I think that's something that we all have to really collectively work on and think about as we respect and live amongst each other and support each other, especially as women. I mean, I think women can be can be really nasty sometimes when they are coming spaces of judgment, and that in an experience that's not their own, that they don't understand. I think that can be really, really difficult. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. Oh, I think there's a lot of connections here. Speak to me about your journey with that.
Yeah. They're not separate, and we try to separate them. Especially in our Western culture, there's lots of fragmentation, lots of splitting the mind and body and different parts of the body, and it's not separate. I tell my clients your three biggest friends with moving through emotion are breath, movement, and sound. For me, movement is my medicine. I have to dance, I have to do yoga, I have to stretch, or I get too rigid in my thinking. If I don't stretch my being, my bones, my muscles, my body, everything becomes rigid. So breath, movement, and sound are your three best friends with moving emotion in your body.
Yeah. And in acknowledging that, sitting with that and like, all right, not being afraid, I think, to step back and be like, I need to do this right now. I might be sitting at my desk and I'm like, I'm feeling this in my body. I need to take a moment and hit reset here, and being aware of that, because if you don't, it's not going to just go away. You're going to have to cope with it or deal with it at some point. So deal with it on the forefront, so it doesn't come back later and get you in a bigger, more magnified way. So thank you for that. Really good stuff. There's so much power in some breath work and breathing and being present and listening to, again, it goes back to listening to our bodies. Our bodies will tell us when we need attention and when we need to process and move something. So important to remember that. All right. Yeah. And you do this in your work. So did you have something else you wanted to add to that before we move to the next? I was just going to
say, I'm sure you've heard it before, but I was going to say that energy, emotion is energy in motion. I'm sure you've heard that, right? Maybe if someone hasn't, you can hear it now. Emotion is energy in motion. And the organism that we are, the body that we are, knows how to move that energy through it. And think of a 2-year-old, they're just going to throw a tantrum. If you think of a 2-year-old, they're going to throw a tantrum. They're going to get so excited about the roller coaster. They're going to get, they have their emotions, they move through it, that they get to the other side. We know how to do it. And as we are adults now, we have to alter that, because we can't just throw a tantrum in the grocery store all the time. Like, we do have to learn how to be the gatekeepers of such things. Yeah. Unfortunately, we've learned to just close the gate.
Yeah.
And not do the process, which is not healthy. It's not functional. It doesn't just go away. Like you said, it stagnates within our being and creates disease. It creates problems more than you know. Yeah. So having a practice or many practices that move the energy through your body is key to having emotional health.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So important. So good. And like you said, it will stagnate. It will show up in other ways. It's meant to be moved through. And our emotions are clues. I think we have to take the negative connotations off that. They're clues. It's our body letting us know it needs some attention in an area and not being afraid to make space for that.
I can't remember who said this. I think I heard it on a Brene Brown podcast, but they talked about emotions being data and not directives. Emotions give you the data, they give you the information. They're not telling you, if you're angry, it's not telling you to be violent.
Right.
It's telling you you're angry. It's giving you information that you're angry. Yes. You know, maybe a boundary's been crossed. Maybe you've allowed a boundary to be crossed. So it's data, it's information. It's not a directive. It's not to tell you what to do with your life. Which is why we shouldn't make decisions when we're like super emotional, right? We should get to a clear-headed place before. We should move the energy through, and so we can think clearly.
Yeah, there is a process, so we don't respond in that way that becomes a problem. It's not the emotion that's the problem. It's the response to it when we don't acknowledge it, get to the root of it, and move through it and process it. Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's so good. Data. Yeah, it's data. It's information. Let's use it to help us, because that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to help us, not hinder us. So being willing to sit with that and do it the way that's going to be best and healthiest for us. Thank you for that. That was so good. How we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. Talk to me about your journey with that.
Yeah, that gets into boundary work of not feeling shame or apologizing for being who you are, for taking up space, for having your own opinions, for having your own desires. I want to do this and not this. I want to eat this and not this. And particularly women, we are so programmed, socialized, trained to be self-sacrificing, to be the martyr. It's glorified. It's not only like supported, it's glorified. I have so many scenarios popping into my head, particularly in Mormon culture, but I really think it's pervasive in many, many cultures. That the more you give, the more you keep a smile on your face while you are empty inside, not caring for yourself, the better woman you are. And it's horrible. It's horrific and not sustainable, and keeping our entire culture down, keeping our species down, with having all of our women be muted and numbed and drained and strained and tired and overwhelmed. So to answer your question, I help all people, including women, unravel the people-pleasing and the self-sacrificing habits and behaviors, and learn how to develop boundaries, learn how to develop honoring of the self as a way to take care of you and the rest of the world and your family. First and foremost, you take care of you. Yeah. You put on your own oxygen mask first.
Absolutely. Yeah. Going back to the airplane scenario, it literally tells you, put on your oxygen mask first, because I don't care if your 8-month-old baby is sitting on your lap. You've got to do it first, because if you aren't getting fed the oxygen, you then can't help your baby. And it goes back to women. I grew up in this Mormon culture. I saw so many women, including my own mother, ragged and empty and hollow because they just kept doing more and more and more for everybody else. And they didn't leave anything for themselves. And that wasn't all the women. I don't want to there were some that were seemingly fine and found space to fill and do and whatnot. But I saw so many that weren't okay. And they were living by this narrative that wasn't true to who they were. It wasn't true to what they were made to be. And so they were living against themselves. They were living against how they were designed, made, their own values, that if they were given the respect, the freedom, the encouragement to speak up to and live out, that they can't do it because it would have taken away from what was wanted from them in that culture. And so it happens in so many of our faith spaces. I mean, you and I are talking about Mormonism because that's our experience, but it happens in Christian spaces, Muslim spaces, and so many faiths, Catholic spaces, so many faith spaces. And anything like that, it drips out into the entire culture. And so you hear there's a lot of expectations of women to just show up and keep showing up until they're pass out exhausted. And it's not until that point, or they have a scary diagnosis, or they just are emotionally spent. And then they realize, oh, I can't do this anymore. We have to stop getting to that point. And it starts with changing these narratives that we have in all these different spaces about women and what's expected of them. And we have to have and being welcomed in as you are, how you were made authentically.
Yeah. I know this is a podcast for women, but men have very similar programs of you keep working, you keep going.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you're hurting. It doesn't matter if you have feelings. You got to go to work. You got to provide. And it's damaging all of us. It's the patriarchal systems. It's the colonial white supremacy systems that are damaging all of us. And we got to unravel those systems because it's affecting all of us.
And it is. It's affecting all of us, every single one of us, including those that are keeping those systems upheld. It's not good for anybody. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday, and it was talking about the journey of infertility and how the stigma is for men that if they're the ones that are having the problem in the wife getting pregnant, if it comes from their side of it, the shame that is part of them. Oh, you're not man enough. You can't, produce the sperm that's necessary to have this baby. What a terrible, horrible thing to say to someone who's, trying in this very sensitive position. This stuff happens all the time, and it's harmful. And it starts with our little children and what we're telling them and what we're allowing and not allowing them to be and show up as in terms of their emotions and just how they're natured and what their feelings are. So it starts at the very beginning. So, but being able to show up unapologetically as yourself and feeling the support of others, that is how we change these narratives and these stigmas, and not being afraid of these conversations. Talked a little bit about values earlier, but let's get back to the importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values in everything you do. Talk to me about that journey for you.
Awesome question. Yeah. In order to be in alignment, in order to be in integrity, which are necessary for knowing and honoring your boundaries, you have to have that why. What are you doing? Why? What is your motivation? What are you aligned with? And you have to get really clear on those value systems. So say if I have profit as the top value and like the top thing I'm striving for, it's my health is going to be negated. My relationships are going to fall to the wayside. And it might take me realizing, I'm thinking of capitalism now and all these big structures.
Yes.
I was writing this morning about how I don't believe you can be, this is maybe a little tangential, but I'll bring it back. I don't believe you can be in integrity and in alignment if you have profit at the forefront of your goals, of your organization, of your family, of your whatever. Because in order to be in integrity and alignment, we have to align with greater things. We have to align with the common good of our species, the common good of life forms and the planet, like bigger things. So anyway, back to my values.
You bring up a good point there. I don't want you to feel like you can't say that, because I think it's important. We have to think about what our priorities are and how it's contributing. I think so many times when we're voting, when we're making decisions, I think as white people, we sit in a privilege where we make them from what's best for our own selves and maybe our immediate family, where so many of our other communities, our other marginalized communities, they will make a collective decision on what's good for the collective. We have to start operating from a place that's good for the collective if we're going to be able to heal anything that's happening right now.
Right. We have to. It's a cancer to be just entirely self-serving and just very insular in our thinking. And only our family matters, only our being matters. And it kills us. If we just buy the cheap food to save money, especially in America, we're eating all sorts of toxic things that are literally killing us. Instead of voting for people who will say, no, we are going to protect our people. We will not allow these kind of things in our food supply, in our water supply, to be sprayed on our crops, etc. Our values do have to be bigger. So back to my journey with why and value. In my coaching program, it's the first thing we do. We get connected with our why to understand our boundaries, because there's times when it's like, okay, well, I want the cookie, but do I not have the cookie? The cookie's my example because I have, eating issues or addictions or whatever. So I don't want to shame anybody for eating any cookies ever. Eat what you want to eat. You're in your own body. I don't care. But when we're coming up on boundaries of like, do I choose this or do I choose that? The why is your North Star. It's your guiding light. So my why, one of them is I am committed to growth and healing, my own, and then supporting others in theirs. So in short, I'm committed to growth and healing. So I bring this cookie to the scenario and I go, is this aligned with my commitment to growth and healing? And the tricky thing is, because boundaries are dynamic, sometimes it is. Most often not. Most often that cookie for me is not aligned with my growth and healing, but sometimes it is, because it brings me so much joy, because it like loosens up whatever. The sugar gives me the opioid receptor painkiller kicks that I need, like whatever. That's something that I talk to people a lot about, is boundaries being a dynamic and changing. And that why really helps us with our direction in life.
Talk to me about living out of your own expectations versus others. You do this, and I have so much respect for the way you do this and how you do this, because you've made choices that go against what the culture says is okay and appropriate. So how did you get to a place, because I think living out of our own expectations is one of the most powerful things we can do. And because it helps us set our values. It helps us to know our boundaries. I mean, it all goes together with all of those pieces. So talk to me about your expectations journey.
So I think that started very early in life. So I grew up in Utah, non-Mormon. I grew up in very dense Mormon culture as an outsider. So for me, I was very young and not accepted. I was very young and was cast out of all sorts of things. So I got used to it as a kid. Like, I'm going to do my own thing. No one's going to like me anyway. So
not going to change that.
Right. You're not going to like me. Damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of scenario that I was in. So I think I just started at a very, very young age going, whatever, I want to jump rope. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. So that hasn't left me. It has affected my relationships, of course. Like, we all have a deep, deep need. I was going to say desire. It's not a desire. We have a deep need to belong. And we know scientifically now that it's stronger than even our need for like food and water and stuff. We have to belong to our parents in order to survive. So we will alter ourselves to belong. So it has affected my relationships by me just always going by the beat of my own drum. I have had to learn, like, okay, how do we interact with other people? You can't just always be super selfish. But it's a gift from the environment that I grew up in, the harsh, unloving environment culturally that I grew up in. it was a gift that I got out of it, was being okay doing my own thing no matter what.
Yeah. Well, and I think I want to point out something. One, it's not selfish to live out of your own expectations. So I want to flip that from you right now. That is a choice you make for your own health. And two, this is something clearly that it is very easy when you're in environments where you are the minority of a faith space or a cultural narrative to just fall in with them and go along so that you can be accepted. And just the fact that you had it in yourself to say, nope, not for me. Sorry, you can't see me for who I am, but I'm going to go on being. That took a lot of inner strength. And I want to like just call that out and honor that and recognize that, because that's hard to do, especially as a kid.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that's really important. And it set the base for you to be able to go through and live out of your own expectations and not be concerned with others. Being mindful, but also like, I'm comfortable in my own skin. And this is what's healthiest for me. I love that. Thank you for that. All right. And this goes nicely into accepting the layered aspects of ourselves, all those parts of us that make up who we are and part of our journey, things we love, things we don't love, all those things that make us who we are. Talk to me about your layers journey.
What a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing to be multifaceted and layered and equally powerful and strong and vulnerable and weak. You know, I find that part of life so fascinating and so beautiful. And I try to think of nature when I get into layers that I don't totally love about myself, that I struggle to love more than others. I think about nature and I don't hate the stems of the trees that produce the leaves. You know, like I love all of it. I love the whole tree. Yeah. I love the whole thing. I love everything it does. Trees are incredible. You're amazing. I have no bad things to say about it. So I try to see me as a part of nature and see me as a bigger part of the whole. And have a lot of love and compassion for my sensitivities. I'm an HSP. We talked about this before we started recording. A highly sensitive person. I check every single box to that. I don't know if it's a diagnosis. Maybe it is, but
it's a part of your character traits, a part of your identity.
Yeah, it's not anything I have any shame about, but it takes responsibility and a cultivation and a tenderness to be okay with the fact that I can't do a lot of things other people do, and I can't operate the way other people operate. And I could beat myself up about it. Like, why can't you stay up late and go out to the concert and drink with the people? Well, I don't know why. I just can't. Like, I can't. I don't operate that way. I'm not designed that way. There's nothing I've been able to do to make me designed that way. So I better just love it because it's easier.
Right.
Yeah.
And we talked about the fact earlier, it's a superpower in a lot of ways. You can sense the dynamic of a room in a way that the people that aren't don't have that character trait can't. I mean, you can sense the temperature of a room, whether it's healthy, whether it's not, what the emotion is of the room. So intuitively in a way that's so insightful and informative to you. So I think that we have to really change the way we view people when they talk about being highly sensitive. It's like, that's a superpower. That's not a weakness. I mean, I think I grew up in a generation, I think you probably did too, where it was like, oh, they're so sensitive. Oh, they take care, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah. And they can also tell you exactly what's happening right now that you don't have a clue about. Because, but also you have to be mindful of that and care for yourself in a different way because you're so intuitive. Your body and your soul can take on all that's happening in the room, and how you have to like parse out and make sure you care for yourself in a way that allows you peace and to not take everybody else's stuff on.
Right. I often perceive things that nobody else does.
Yeah.
And it actually took me a long time as a kid, even into my early 20s. I didn't realize that other people weren't getting the information that I was getting. And I'd get really frustrated. Like, why don't you understand this basic thing? Like, why can't you see the sign in front of you? And I didn't realize I was seeing more. I was hearing more. I was feeling more. I was perceiving more than other people were.
Mm-hmm.
And they got the information later, typically.
Wow. And
someone would say days, weeks, months, years later, oh, da 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 da. And I thought, I saw that a long time ago. So it's definitely a superpower. And I think that narrative is still really strong, that it's a weakness.
Yeah.
There's still this prevalent hyper masculinity of push through, power forward, this go, 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 do, do, do.
Yeah.
Like unrestrained, young energy that has no respect for the yin, has no respect for the magic, dark, mysterious mystic that is the yin states that are very sensitive and very soft. So I feel honored to be deep in that realm.
Yeah.
And I respect the responsibility that I need to do to take care of myself to be in this body that I'm in.
Yeah. At what point do you think you understood that's how you were and had that sensitivity and empathy and grace towards yourself for that?
Early in my 20s.
Okay.
Because I was becoming a human, I was becoming an adult human being.
Yeah.
I started to understand that. Massage therapy school helped with that. I didn't get the term HSP. I didn't know highly sensitive person for a while. And when I discovered that, it was so validating. Like, yes, this
the light goes on. You're like, this makes so much sense.
This is me to a T. Absolutely. And I really appreciated having books to read about it and a body of work and people speaking out. Alanis Morissette speaks out about it. It was great to see other people this way, and then to not, again, be mean to myself because my hearing is extra sensitive.
Yeah.
And instead bring earplugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, adapt and honor my body and leave the parties early and whatever I need to do, but not think that I was broken in any way.
Yeah, I love that. That's really beautiful. Thank you for that. I think that's so powerful. And again, that's another thing that goes back to when you're young and, and how you show up and your parents' kind of ability, your caretakers, your teachers, so I think so much happens in the classroom when these things show up with people that need to be just pay more attention to, adapt these things to make it so these kids aren't felt to be different or ostracized. That's how they show up in the world. And there's magic in that. So let's celebrate and honor that instead of creating narratives around that might make them feel otherwise. I think that's really important. But it starts when you're young. But thanks for speaking to that. I think it's so powerful. In living out feel, in finding empowerment, embracing layers, how does this affect the quality of your relationship with yourself as well as with other people?
I believe and I experience from my experiences, I see how much finding empowerment and embracing these layers of who we are, how much that feeds all connection. When I am deeply connected with myself, when I love, respect, and honor myself, I am prime and available and ready and valuable in connecting with others. And when I'm not there, when I'm not connected to myself, when I'm not embracing my layers and loving myself, I and we all tend to spew that lack of love out into our world and into our relationships.
Yeah.
And I wish that's something that people would understand more. I kind of feel like I'm tiptoeing on this about to say this here. Like the stuff we don't process gets put on our loved ones.
Yeah, and our coworkers, and just the people that we come across in our entire environment. That poison comes out, and it's just like you said, it spits onto other people, and it's unhealthy. It's not good for anybody. And it's not. And so just recognizing, I always say, go back to that thing that makes you squirm a little, and instead of seeing it as bad or something you need to speak out against. And not that that's not the case. There are evil and bad things in the world we have to speak out against. But make sure this thing is not rooted in some unhealthy insecurity that needs to be healed, or a narrative that you've been told that is false. I grew up with a lot of false narratives. I carried a lot of false narratives for years that guided me and how I showed up in the world and my opinions and how I treated other people, that I had to really get into and heal and examine over the last 5 years. So I was able to oh, this is who I actually am. This is what I actually believe. This is how I actually want to show up in the world. This is actually how I want to treat and respect other people and learn from, and just that realization, I will always learn. I will always be unpacking, evolving, unlearning, and accepting that as my reality rather than living in these narratives that don't, when those things are poking at you, sit with them. Why is that bothering you so much? Why are you so uncomfortable with that? How is that showing up in your relationships and how you're able to interact with other people? I think that's so important. And you have to start there. You have to start there.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that, you have to structure your life in a way that you are able to sit with that thing, to look at that thing. So you have to fight the busy, working at max capacity. I find most people try to operate at their max capacity and then judge themselves for not being able to go over it, rather than recognizing max capacity and taking steps down. Like that should be a goal, to take steps down from that capacity. And can I operate at 80%? Can I operate at 60%? Can I operate at 40%? So I have more for whatever. So I'm going to piggyback and say, to structure your life, to start to alter your life in a way that you are available to do the work you need to do to be who you want to be in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to make that space. You got to make that space and make it a priority and consider what the cost is if you don't, for yourself and for anybody you come in contact with. It's important to remember how do you want to show up in the world? And what is it going to take for you to do that? But yeah, making that space is key, and being willing to go there in those places. Thank you so much. So good. We are down to the rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Sexual play and exploration. I think people shy away from that. I need to say it more.
They do. And they do. And I want to say on that, and I talked about this with Fanny, and I want to say it here. And this was such a revelation to me. And this is where we've got to be educated better about our bodies and how they work. Women have a clitoris. A clitoris was given to us for pleasure. That's why it's there. That's the function of it. And we don't hear that. We certainly don't hear it in our faith spaces. And this God you're talking about, and this God I believe exists, I just see God differently now than I did in those faith spaces, gave you this. So why are we so afraid of it? Why are we have so much fear around it? So I wanted to throw that into that. I'm very passionate about learning more about that. I've got a lot I've got to unpack in that area. I have not arrived. I have so much respect for anybody that is in a healthy space with that. That is so freeing to be able to live from that space. So sorry to jump in. I was supposed to be rapid fire, but I wanted to say that.
It's fine. I absolutely love helping people get to that place of having sex be sacred and beautiful and alive and fun and playful, and none of that other shit that you were raised with. That's such a passion of mine. Okay. 5 activities that nourish me: sexual play, movement, creation. So I like creating. I'm very earthy. I like creating with my whole apothecary of herbs and foods and nourishing things. So food apothecary witchy creation time. I don't know if there's a word for that. Cold exposure, cold plunges.
Yeah.
And then just any nature time. Anytime communing with the greater magic that is all around us.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. All right. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
I want to feel grounded and light, as in levity, light. soft, joyful, and inspired, which I suppose is another kind of light inspiration.
Absolutely. Love that. Thank you so much. All right. Tell us, Melissa, where people can find you and how they can work with you. Don't worry, audience. This is all going to be on our resources page on embracinglayers.com, but I just want to give you a chance to speak to that.
Thanks. Yeah. My website's the best spot. Everything's connected there at melissalhite.com. I am on social media a little bit here and there, but for my self-care, not so much. Mm-hmm. And so the links to all of my things, blog posts, podcasts, all sorts of things is at Linktree, linktr.ee/Melissa L. Hite.
And Hite is Hite. I want to throw that in there too.
Hite. White without the W. Yep.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. That's a good way to put it. You've probably been doing that for a long time.
Years.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much today for this conversation. I knew when you reached out to me and I was like, this is an important conversation to have. We've got to continue to have these conversations, be open with them, and just get to a place where we can respect each other's journeys and support each other in those journeys. And it's not about whether you're comfortable with someone else's journey. It's about whether it's healthy for them. And if you're not comfortable with their journey, that might be a clue to do your own work. Or sometimes we just disagree with people and that's fine. But just because we disagree doesn't mean our journey or our way is right. It just means we have a different view of the world. And so we still need to be respectful and honoring to everybody as they walk these journeys. That's how we change narratives. That's how we make this place healthier for all of us. So I just want to end with that today. Thank you for your work in the world, your vulnerability, your authenticity. You have such a beautiful confidence and air about who you are, comfort in your own skin that I think it's something that we all need to aspire to and get and do exploration with. I think it's really powerful. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. This has been great.
Good. And podcast audience, take a look at those things that make you a little squirmy or make you a little uncomfortable. Do you need to dive into some areas and do some healing or just even explore why it is that is problematic for you? But embrace your layers, love yourself well, take good care of yourself, live out of your own expectations. Don't be afraid to honor the you that you were created to be. And we hope you take this information and bless yourself and bless other people with it and have a great week.